Okay, before we get into removing the stern drive, the Alpha 1 stern drive, I just want to say thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check out CanadaWideMarine.com for all your boating needs. Let's go through the steps of removing a stern drive. An Alpha 1 Gen 2 stern drive, very, very common Mercruiser stern drive. Probably the most common Mercruiser stern drive in general. Today we're going to pull it off. This is part of our spring commission. We're going to pull the stern drive off and we're going to inspect his bellows. We're going to inspect his gimbal bearing and drive shaft splines and the universal joints as well while we're in there. That should be done every year. This boat here, we actually replaced his bellows last summer, so I don't expect to find anything amiss in there, but that was 8 months ago, so at the beginning of the season here, we're going to pull this drive off and have a quick look at the bits and pieces in there. It should be done every year. It's an easy job. It doesn't take much. You can do it at home. It's a little awkward if you don't have something to take the weight of the stern drive, but with a Gen 2, they're not too bad. You can do it by hand. If you're doing a Bravo drive, they're big and heavy. You can still do it, but have some help. Ideally, a crane or a stern drive jack is the way to do it with the bigger stern drives. But these Gen 2s, they're so popular. Lots of people have them on their smaller boats, and it's something. Removing the drive is something that you can do at home. And I'm going to show you how. First thing to do with your drive trimmed up like this is right. Can you see there? Yeah, right up under the front here. There is a little hose connection for your speedometer, for your pitot tube. And this one is it's a push button one. So I push the button in and disconnect the hose, and I'm doing it on the back side here, so it's a little awkward for me, but there we go. I'll zoom in when I get this off. This is the pitot tube connector here. It's got a little push button there on the side. You push that in and it pulls off of this little bit right there. Where'd that flashlight go? There we go. There we go. The pitot tube pulls off of this little fitting right here. It's got a little O-ring seal on it. It's just a quick connect. There's a couple of other styles. There's some that you do, the older ones have a quarter turn twist, but this is the more common push button style. You push the button on that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim this down into a horizontal position, and we're going to put the drive into forward gear. Have to have the stern drive in forward gear to remove it. Then we'll put the drive into forward gear. This is our gear shift selector here. This, okay, what can we see? How can we see that? There we go. This lever here, that's forward, neutral, and that's reverse all the way over there. So if you're not in forward gear, this arm won't slide off of the arm on the bottom here. And if you try and put it back together when it's not in forward gear, you will damage this or your arm. If you can even force it on, I don't even know. Never done it. So straight ahead is forward gear. Now we've got our drive in forward gear here. That has your shift linkage in the right position so that you can slide your drive off. Next thing we need to do is remove our trim rams because they're holding the drive onto the gimbal housing there. It's pretty simple to do. You just need a screwdriver. Now I can't remember. Oh, that would be the bigger ones. These are held on with a snap ring under this cover. Zoom in on that a little bit. You can see we got a little snap ring on there. Pop that off. And there's a flat washer in behind that. So we'll do that to all four. These snap rings will go flying. So if you're doing it in a gravel driveway, maybe put a blanket down or something. If it's a saltwater boat, sometimes those snap rings can be badly corroded and they will break. The little ears will break off of them. Replacements are available. If you're at all concerned about them, replace them. They're cheap. You can get them at Canada Wide Marine. We have them on the shelf. The link is in the video description. Okay, flat washers and drives off. Now, now the trim rams just slide off. Just like that. That's all we need to do. We don't need to totally disconnect the front. We just need to disconnect it from the back there. Now, without breaking anything. I have a mobile crane set up that I use to take the weight of these. If you're doing it at home without a crane or a jack to lift your stern drive, you can use blocks of wood and set them up underneath your skeg here to support the drive, and then you can slide the whole unit back on your blocks of wood. I'm using an engine crane that I've modified to take the stern drives off. It works well in our shop here. So, we're in forward gear, trim rams are off, pitot tube is off. All that's left is to take these 6 bolts out, 3 down this side, 3 down the other side. Six nuts out, 5 washers. Why only 5? Because one has a bonding strap for corrosion protection so that it's all bonded together, and that acts as the 6th washer. Take the washers out, give it a little shake, and you can see the whole unit just slides straight out there. I had this one off 8 months ago, so it comes apart nice and easy. Being careful to catch your U-joint as it comes out and your drive shaft. Let me grab a rag. Now this is the sort of thing that we're looking for now that we've got it off and we're inspecting. Let's have a look inside here, and we can see that the bellows are dry. There's no water in those bellows. And then that first ring with all the grease all around it, that's our gimbal bearing. And to check that, turn that light out. We simply, can we see that? Yeah, okay, we can see that. You just reach in, grab that inner ring, and give it a turn. And you want it to be able to turn nice and free and nice and smooth. No rumble, grinding feeling, nothing like that. So what we see here are nice dry bellows. If there's any water in your bellows, they are leaking. There's no way for water to get in there. They need to be dry. If there's water in there, you have a leak and you need to replace your bellows. You need to do that before you do damage to your universal joints and your drive shaft, and have it all rust up, and not to mention sinking the boat. If your bellows are leaking, the water is going to leak through your gimbal bearing and into the back of the boat and cause a possible sinkage if your bilge pump can't keep up. So the other thing we're going to have a look at here is our universal joints. I'm going to give them a flop around to make sure that they're all moving nice and free. There's no binding, no stickiness. They need to be that floppy. Let's see if we can get a good view there. There we go. This is how floppy you want your universal joints to be. No excess play. They don't click back and forth or anything, but they move nice and freely through their whole range of motion. Drive shaft splines, nicely greased. We only did these eight months ago. You need to grease them every year. I replace far too many drive shafts and engine couplers from lack of greasing them. There are grease nipples on the coupler, but they're very hard to see and get to. We pull the drive off every year to inspect the bellows, so we grease them when the drive is off. Now, to put this back together, you're going to need, let's see if we can take the glare off of that, you're going to need an outdrive gasket kit. You want to replace this seal here, which seals on the front of the housing here, keeps the water from coming in from the outside through there. You want to replace your gasket, of course, and then very important to replace these O-rings that support your gimbal bearing, that support the shaft on your gimbal bearing. And this forward one here seals your splines from any dirt and water getting in there from your bilge, because this part is actually exposed in your engine room. So, and then the other seal that we replace is this O-ring right here. Zoom right in on that. That's for your water pickup. And that's where the water comes from your water pump into your motor there. So you want to make sure you replace that one as well. We did this one 8 months ago. We glue them in there with some contact cement. So this one's still in nice shape and nicely raised. So we're going to leave the O-ring on there, but we are going to replace this gasket. So we do that every season. Let's zoom back out here. Try that button. There we go. So we'll take the old gasket off. Got an O-ring pick here. I'll just wipe the grease off of the shaft. Let's just turn the camera a little more. There we go. You notice I started with the O-ring that's all the way in. If I start out here, I end up with a groove that the O-ring will snap into when I try and get the next one off. So I start with this one so that when I go over this groove, it has an O-ring in there and doesn't get stuck in there. Once you get them stuck in there a few times, you learn that trick. So we'll start with this one here. We'll put that on first. This is the seal to protect the splines from any mostly water from your engine room, because your engine room should be pretty clean. Stops the water from getting in on your splines and stops the grease from coming out too. And then these O-rings, these two here, support the shaft in your gimbal bearing. Keep it centered. A little bit tight going over that first O-ring. And number two. Just like that. Now some of these universal joints have grease nipples on them. These ones are sealed units and in very nice condition. And this seal here that I showed you before, it simply pops out from inside there. Slide a new one in. It rests up against a shoulder in there. And there. That's all those parts. It's a little awkward working past the camera here, so bear with me. And there's our gasket. I greased the gasket. As you saw when I took it off, it came off real nice and easy. So I put a little bit of grease on the gasket on both faces. We're using Quicksilver Extreme Grease. That's the light's pretty bad there. There you go. This is the recommended for the drive shaft splines. It's an extreme pressure lubricant. I like a little bit of grease on the gasket there. This stops the gasket from sticking. Makes it easy to replace next year. There's a O-ring, silicone seal ring there. That goes around the oil passageway here that comes from your lube monitor bottle up in the engine room. That slides onto there. Now the control is still in forward gear. This is pushed all the way out. We're in forward gear up forward. It needs to be that way so that this can be lined up to put the drive back on. A little bit more of the extreme grease and grease our splines. You don't want to grease the end of it. You don't want a big glob of grease on the end. That will give you a hydraulic lock when you're trying to put this together, when you're trying to push it into the coupler. It'll fill the coupler up with grease and you won't get the drive all the way on. A little bit of grease on our O-rings so that they slide into the gimbal bearing properly. Now we've checked our gimbal bearing, we've checked our bellows. They're in good condition. No water in them. Gimbal bearing's nice and smooth. So this unit can go right back on now. Making sure our shift lever is pointed all the way forward. Now one little tip. When you're putting your drive together, put your propeller on. Now what you need to be aware of, let's see if we can see this. Can you see past that shaft there? I'll zoom right in on that. If you turn your propeller forwards, clockwise, when you're looking at it from the back, if you turn it forward, it will put the lower unit into neutral. You need to turn your propeller backwards. Zoom out there. You need to turn your propeller backwards to lock it into gear. Now, you'll want to be able to do this so that you can turn this drive shaft to line up the splines when you're sliding it all back together. If you turn your propeller forward, it puts it into neutral. You won't be able to get your drive on because your shift lever is turned out sideways, and you won't be able to turn your drive shaft to line up your splines. So you need to turn your propeller backwards. So let's see if I can put this in without sending the camera flying. So, propeller's turning backwards. We are in forward gear in the lower unit and the control on forward. Feeding the drive shaft into the gimbal bearing there. And again, I'm trying to do this without knocking the camera, so it's a little more awkward for me here, but we'll get her. Okay, there we go. Shift linkage slides up into the housing here. Now we're just about there. So if I turn the propeller shaft backwards just ever so slightly, it locks it in, it lines up the splines, and we just slide straight on. Now, because we've got our little check valve here, you can see a little bit of gear lube leaking out of there. I usually run one up right away just to seal that up a bit. That stops us losing too much gear lube there and making a mess. Don't forget to grease your threads before you put your nuts on, especially in a saltwater boat. If you don't have grease on these threads, they'll get really tight and hard to take off in the future. We do these every year. This one was just a part. Lots of grease on there. Tighten them all nice and even. I think the spec on these is about 45 or 50 foot-pounds. 7/16 stud, fine thread. Okay, get this crane out of the way, drop you down. Now when you're putting your trim rams on, I'm supporting it with my knee here. If I just have one connected and I let the weight down on it, it will actually push this one out. So to keep them even, support the weight while you're connecting them up. Makes it a whole lot easier. I grease all these shafts. Again, I just had this one apart a little while ago, so there's lots of grease on there. That's why it's all working nice and smooth. Lots of grease. If you watched my other videos, you know I like to grease everything. So I put the clips on one side and then push the shafts all the way through nice and snug so that I can get the clips on the other side. Last bit, put your caps on. Again, I put a little bit of grease on them to make them go on nice and easy. Hold them nice and square. If you put them on crooked, they will actually break the tabs off and fall off later. So just push them on nice and square and even. And the last thing to remember is your pitot tube underneath. So I'm going to go and you can see we're still in drive. We're still in forward gear. I can't turn the propeller backwards. You can turn it forwards because it's on a ratchet gear on the dog teeth in there. But you can't turn it backwards. I'm going to go and put the drive in neutral and trim it up. So I put the drive in neutral and propeller spins nice and free now. No ratchets. So we're definitely in neutral and our linkage is connected properly. And the last thing to do is just here, connect up our pitot tube on that fitting there. With a quick push button one, it just clips right on, nice and easy. And that's that. One stern drive removed and reinstalled. Inspect our bellows, inspected our gimbal bearing, and greased our drive shaft splines.